Hello, Facebook land. Welcome to Jon Ferrian Live, broadcasting to you tonight, live from British Columbia. We're up here with the Cascade Drift Skipper Snowmobile Club. We had 16 riders up here, all riding the Coquihalla Pass, having a great time tonight. So come on in, let us know who's watching, drop it in the comments, let us know where you're watching from, and we'll be celebrating that. We'll be calling it out. I'll shout your name out. We'll let people know where you're watching from. So come on in, and don't forget to share this out tonight, guys. We got the share and win contest every single week. Boom. This week, one of my favorite items that I've been using for myself, knee guards. The 5 pivot knee guards from Fly Racing. They retail for $90, guys. That's the biggest prize we've ever given away on Jon Ferrian Live. And tonight is the night. You're going to get to win it if you share this out. So, reminder, watch the show, share the video everywhere, anywhere that makes sense for you. Tell your friends as you comment it out, share it out, why they should be watching it and what it's about. Make sure it's public and or visible so that I can see it. If I can't see the share somewhere because it's not visible and it's private to friends only and we're not Facebook friends yet, I'm not going to be able to get you in the contest. And again, follow Fly Racing Snow on Instagram and on Facebook, and we'll do that. So we've got folks in. Michael is coming in from Arizona. Kevin Murray in from Michigan. Michael Flower. We got Katie Fish. Boom. I don't know how to say it. Kelowna, BC. Mike Morrison is up there. Mike Morrison says, I think I can see you from here, Jon Ferrian. We're not too far. We're up in the neighborhood. So, all right, guys, I'm going to kill the music and let you know a little bit about what Jon Ferrian Live is all about. So this show comes on every Sunday night right here, 7 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Central time, whatever time zone you're in, just adjust your clocks. But here we go, guys. What we're doing every single week is we're talking sleds, sled safety, sled education, positive growth of the sport. And tonight is no different. In just a second here, I'm going to bring up Isaac Sample, who is the president of the 10,000 Lakes Snowmobile Club in Minnesota. So in 3, 2, 1, I've got Isaac. How's it going, buddy?
It's going. Thanks for having me on, John.
Awesome, awesome. So it's one thing I'm really impressed with was that you got this whole thing kicked off at such a young age, and we're going to get into all of that tonight. But really cool what you're doing. But tonight, 17, right? 17 years old is
Yes, sir.
how you are currently. And so definitely probably, I've had some very young guests on before, but you're definitely in the top 5 as far as youngest guests I've ever had on the show. But really appreciate you coming in and joining us tonight. And especially since I know it's not cool to be on Facebook for folks your age. And so we appreciate you making the sacrifice and coming on the old people program, Facebook Live.
Yeah, I mean, it's
It's
not really a sacrifice
you
for
can
snowmobiling.
you can just call it out. It's all good. But hey, guys, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how I know Isaac first here, and then I'll turn it over to Isaac, and Isaac will kind of just introduce himself, and we'll kind of go from there. But so Isaac is actually the nephew of a good friend of mine, Brian Bleaky, and his aunt and uncle is Brian Bleaky, Kelsey over there as well. What's Kelsey's last name again? I always forget. Remind me.
Parent,
Barrett.
parent.
Barrett. There you go. So Kelsey Barrett, Brian Bleaky, aunt and uncle, which is who you're living with nowadays too. But I've known Brian for quite a few years just through motorsports, power sports. Back when I was actively local in the Brainerd Lakes area in the clubs, your uncle Brian and I knew each other for quite a while there. And then I got to meet you personally at Heydays. So in 2019, Heydays, back this last September, literally I was just walking down some aisles of Heydays. I looked over and I saw Kelsey and I recognized her, and so I stopped and said hi. And then that's when you and I got introduced, and that's when we scheduled the show. And so appreciate you again coming on, and let's just let everybody know a little bit more about you. So, who is Isaac Sample? Where did you grow up? What did you about? You're in high school still. You got a career in the military, but let me just turn it over to you for a few minutes and give us a little background on who Isaac is.
Yeah, thanks. So, as you already said, my name's Isaac, and I'm 17 years old. I grew up bouncing around in the Brainerd Lakes area. until I was 12 years old when my aunt adopted me because, the sad story, parents aren't always the best of parents. So luckily, I got a second chance, and Kelsey adopted me, so I moved out to California with them, and we were out there for a few years, 3 or so to be exact. And then, luckily we came back to Minnesota. I'm back in Nisswa, Minnesota now,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Nice, nice. And so, yeah, I mean, and to me, that makes the story that much more impressive is that, you, like many youth of the world that we live in, don't always have the most stable living environment and home over the years, right? And to me, that's one of the things, Isaac, that I'm probably the most proud of you about is what you've been through and where you've come from, and now what you're doing with your life and how you're continuing to try and make a difference in the world that we live in, and specifically to the snowmobile community. So I just want to tell you out loud, buddy, that I'm super proud of you. And I know your aunt and uncle who you're living with, and you've got some great people looking after you there. So make sure you give them a 2 thumbs up, a shout out to me from John all the way out here in the West Coast. So.
I sure will. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. So let's just dive in a little bit to some of the background on, when did you first get into snowmobiling personally? Just give us a little rundown of maybe how old you were when you first got on your first sled and kind of your evolution of how you gotten into snowmobiling to get you interested in it in the first place.
Yeah, unlike most people, I was born into a family with snowmobiles.
Okay.
Luckily, Kelsey and Brian, when they got together, Kelsey went on a lot more rides, because she was with Brian. And I remember, probably being 5 or 6 years old, somewhere in that range. And, Kelsey would pull up to my grandma's house where I was living, and I would hop on the little 99 Z440, and I'd be on the back, but we'd go out for a rip. I'd get to, maybe use the throttle a little bit. She'd yell at me for going a little too fast, but that's okay. And then, just that evolved into her eventually letting me drive it, which, felt amazing. That everyone knows that first feeling of, getting on a snowmobile and just like feeling the power and the control of being behind an amazing machine.
Yeah.
And then 5th grade, I personally bought my first snowmobile. I don't remember what year it was, but it was an old Yamaha Type 250, fun little sled.
10 or 11 years old in fifth grade. Isn't that about the ballpark how old you would have been?
Yeah, I think I was 11 at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
$700 sled. Saved up
$700
for it.
sled that you ended up buying with, was it allowance money? Was it some money that you had made doing odd jobs, or like what kind
Uh, to be honest, I couldn't tell you how I got the money, but I got half the money, Brian the other half, and I'm very
Nice.
appreciative of that because that first sled was my first baby, and it's kind of turned into now our family has 10, and
Yeah.
I personally have 7.
You have 7 snowmobiles?
Yeah.
Give us the quick rundown. What do you have in the posse? What do you have in the corral?
Oh man, so many I can't even remember all of them. So I have a 1980 Polaris Apollo.
Oh, nice.
I have a 1980 Enticer 340 one lunger that I'm going to try and turn into a race sled for this winter.
Awesome.
I have a 1977 Articat El Tigre 440,
Very sweet.
well 4000. Then me and my uncle co-own a 77 El Tigre 5000. Then we have a 19. I personally have a 1996 ZRT 600, which is blown up at the moment. not the best purchase.
Part of my questions actually was how many of these 7 snowmobiles are actually running snowmobiles? Most of them, or some of them?
At this point, some of them.
All right, that's fair.
The Apollo doesn't run. The Enticer doesn't run. Both the El Tigres run. We have, I think I want to say in early 70s. Brian's gonna hate me if I say it wrong. I want to say it's a Panther, but I could be wrong. And then we have the 89 Indy.
Okay.
We have my ZRT. I had a ZR 600, but I sold that.
Okay.
And then we have a 2000 Z440, the same one I learned to ride on.
Yeah.
2016 ZR600, and then a 2017 ZR LT Gray 6000.
So when you're out doing your main riding and your main trail riding stuff too with Brian, I'm assuming you're on probably the newer machines that you're out riding on typically.
Nope,
No.
I'm on. Last season I was on my ZR,
Okay.
and this season I was supposed to be on the ZRT, but I'm on the 440.
All right. Just because you got to keep them running, right? So
Yeah.
it's actually pretty cool that you're running that vintage sled. I mean, almost all, or I'd say the majority of all those sleds you're talking about are literally older than you are at this point. I'm sure, right?
Yeah, everything that I own is older than me. I've never owned a sled newer than
Yep.
me.
And so you're getting the full experience, we call that, where you get to work on your machines more than you get to ride them. But it's
Sir.
probably building you some mechanical know-how, some appreciation for the sport that, frankly, there's a lot of people out there where their parents or their uncle or whoever just supply them a sled and they go out and they frankly probably don't appreciate it as much as the work and time and effort that you've put into it for yourself. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the key thing I like to push in the club is it doesn't matter what you ride as long as you want to ride. Even if you don't have a sled, we will find means to get you on one.
Yeah. And so let's just kick right into, what was the idea, the concept? Where did the origins of the 10,000 Lake Snowmobile Club come from? Like, how did tell me about a moment in time, if it was a discussion, if it was hey, we should do this, or was it your uncle, like, planting seeds in your mind? Just talk us through kind of how that all happened. So,
Well, it was all my uncle's idea. I was just a snowmobile rider. Um, but one day after a ride, it was just me and my uncle that day. Excuse me. We went for a ride and we stopped at a local restaurant and we sat down, had dinner, and he just looked at me and he's like, "I have a serious question for you.
okay.
What would you think about starting a youth snowmobile club?" And me being 15 years old, I looked at him and I'm like, "What? What are you talking about? Why?" And he's like, "You've come to meetings with me and you've commented and you've seen how, no offense, how old, how the generation kind of skipped.
Yeah.
Um, locally, all of our snowmobile clubs are a majority 40 years older plus, you know. And he's like, we need to do something about it because I know you love the sport. I know I love the sport. We need to, get the next generation in so we can continue to have the sport. So I made up a little flyer, gave it the A-OK.
Yeah.
I went to school and I asked to put it up. They said no. So
Okay.
I took to just walking around, and anybody who had FXR, anyone who had Climb, anyone who had 509 or Arctic Cat jackets, anyone I saw who looked under the age of 20 who even went near a snowmobile, I'm like, "Hey, do you like riding? I like riding. We should talk about it sometime." And it started with once a month meeting at a local restaurant, and it took 3 months till we got our first person to come.
Awesome.
And it just built from that.
Yeah, persistence paid off, right? And so, as you got into starting the club and the first few months in the meetings, kind of what's been the evolution of the club meetings and the people who are showing up, and just what are you doing with the club now that it's been actively going? I'll just turn it back over to you. So,
Well, a key thing for us is, being involved with other clubs. The only reason we've grown as much as we have is we went to other clubs and gave a very awkward spiel, kind of like I'm doing right now, and I told them what we're about,
yeah,
and I brought kids with me. The more kids came, we try to get every kid to go to at least one county meeting and at least one local town meeting, and so they can see the difference between their meetings and ours.
yeah,
Um, but the way we get involved is we don't have trails to keep up like everyone else does. We don't have a groomer. We don't have, all the fundraising money. We don't do the gambling or anything like that. We help preseason and we help clear brush, just get the trail ready for the upcoming season. Uh, we have helped clubs with numerous events, whether it be races or snowmobile safeties, which was another great opportunity to get out and give a spiel to the kids. And even things as little as, one day we got a call from a snowmobile club in Snowdios, and they're like, "Hey, do you guys think that you could get a few people together to come and help us repaint our ice scraper for the drag races?" And we're like, "Okay, time and date, show up." And it was fun. We goofed around the whole time, but we got it done. It looked pretty, and we get to say every time we see that ice scraper go out on the ice before the race that we also volunteered at, we're like, we did that.
Yeah,
And it's a little piece of pride that, follows the kids, and they see they're making a difference, and that helps.
that's awesome. So Isaac, what's kind of the average-ish age? I mean, if there's an average, if there is one, or is it mostly teens? Is there anybody who's kind of like preteen from 10 to 13 in that range, or what age is the people who are part of the club usually?
Uh, a majority of our members are 15 to 17 years old.
Okay.
We, our kind of rule as far as the age goes is if you're old enough to get your endorsement and you're under 20 years old, if you're still a teenager,
Yeah.
we are very thankful to have you even consider being a part of the club.
Exactly. And so I'm assuming it's in Minnesota. What I still remember is it 12 years old is the age that kids can start getting their permit to ride, their
Yes,
safety permit and stuff? Okay.
12 years old.
Yeah. And so to me, that was one of the coolest parts about when you and I talked on the phone originally about this is the interaction that you have with the other clubs and the reaction that the other clubs have had about what you guys are trying to do. And, let's before we go down that road though, let's talk a little bit more about what the club is doing as far as rides go. Like when you guys go and you meet for a dinner or whatever too, but then you're also riding pretty consistently too. At least you had been in the past, right? And so just describe what that kind of a riding event looks like for your club.
Yeah, well, last season we tried to get on a few rides, and schedule is very selecting, but we got on, I believe, 4, which isn't that impressive, but we
That's
got on 4 good rides last season. And when we go on these rides, you know, we kind of structure it like a normal snowmobile club would. We have a lead, and then, we have a few people who don't really like going 30 miles an hour for the new people.
yeah,
So we'll let them head, and we have stop points.
yeah,
But then we tend to have a lead who is really good at direction. That's normally one of my good friends, Dane.
hmm
And then we kind of try to space it out, like beginner, someone who's a little more experienced, beginner, and then we have a tail. I tend to be the tail because if somebody breaks down, I can, try and make sure that they stay calm, or we're like, it's not a
yeah.
big deal, and then we get them back on. Or, if they get stuck, we all know in Minnesota you can't get stuck.
Eventually, you'll hit dirt and they'll make it go further, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And just for the kind of, there's a couple of comments here in the chat box here I'm watching on Facebook here, and somebody questioned like endorsements question mark. And so I'm not sure if Michael, if we've already answered that for you already, but what the safety permit or the riding endorsement is you go through a rider safety course for snowmobiling, and it's pretty much the same across most states that have snowmobile riding. Even here in Washington State, it's virtually the same, and it allows the rider to operate their vehicle without a official driver's license legally because they've gone through the training, the safety, the riding instruction. It's a good idea for everybody if they haven't ever gone through it. I know in Minnesota, I remember as I was growing up, there was a point where it went from actually being required to go through a safety training course, even for all riders after a certain date. Is that still the case that you know of, Isaac, or no?
As far as I know, 12 years old, you can first take the test.
Yeah,
And then it's, there's like little rules of like where they ride, where they can't ride, can't cross streets until 14,
yeah,
little things like that. But the big thing is after after you turn 16 years old, you only have to do the on portion. You don't
right,
have to go take a skills test
yeah,
or do the classroom thing. You just have to pass the online class, which I recommend for anyone.
yeah.
Uh, although at 8, I believe it's no longer required as long as you have a valid driver's license. But I still recommend it for everyone because you'd be amazed with how many people think, oh, yeah, I'll know what the signs mean. And then they don't.
Yeah, nope, I hear you. And then one of the viewers here too, Michael's asking, like, how many riders typically do you bring on your rides when you guys go out? Like when you had your 4 rides last year, are we talking like 5 riders? Are we talking 20 riders? Like on average when you go out for a ride?
We're talking anywhere from 2 riders, just 2 friends, hitting the trails. The most people we had on a ride last winter was 9 people. So we don't have the biggest of numbers, but
Yeah,
that doesn't deter us from, still pursuing what we love and pushing to help.
awesome, awesome. And then I think on the phone you mentioned with me too that typically when you have a kind of an official ride, you have at least one adult with you at some point in time too. Is that the case or not always?
We try to,
Yeah,
but if Brian is out of town, we make it known to the parents. And since we live in a smaller community here, we are very thankful to. I know every member's parents
yeah,
personally, so I can be like, "Hey, is it okay if me and Derek go out for a ride?" Uh, and they don't even question if there's an adult because they trust us.
yeah.
But we still try and keep somebody who is an adult there, but I act as the adult if there's not. If that clarifies the question.
Yep, nope, absolutely. And then the other thing too is, a lot of people who watch this show are out here and they ride mountain terrain and they're out in the backcountry and a lot of times there's no cell service and my assumption based on where you live, that was my stomping grounds growing up myself from the time I was probably 14 years old all the way till I was, in my mid 20s before I moved out of town. That was kind of my riding area, my stomping grounds, and I believe you probably have cell phone service probably 80-90% of the areas that you're riding. Is that the case or no?
Me personally, it's I wouldn't know because I don't go on my phone when I ride.
No, but if you have
But
an emergency, I guess that's what I'm getting at is
if
yeah,
there's an emergency, I do believe I have about 50% coverage.
yeah,
But I know where coverage, and luckily all of our trails kind of go near towns or near townships,
yeah.
so we can always walk at least to a place that has rescue available.
Yeah, and the snow and the that's the other thing too. I don't know that a lot of people understand the difference in the amount of snow. Like out here in Washington State, you go out there and you might be walking around on literally 8 to 10 feet of snow that's on the ground, and like if you were to fall in a hole by a creek, you'd be up looking up at the top of the snow line. Where in Minnesota, on average, you guys I think get if you have 2 to 3 feet of snow on the ground at any given point in the season, that's a good season, right?
We're really lucky this season because actually we have about 3 to 4 feet on the ground right now, but that's all compact down. The trails are
Yeah.
about 2 feet deep, but we have about 3 to 4, and it's still snowing right now. In the last 3 days, we've gotten a total of 16 inches or so.
Yeah, and this is probably a pretty major winter for you guys compared to what you've had on average most of your life, I'm sure, right?
It sure is. It's awesome to see that, from when I was 15, we got like half the season we didn't have snow. And
Nice.
then last year we had snow, but it wasn't always a lot. And now this season we're complaining because we don't even get to ride half the time because we're shoveling snow.
That's one thing about living out in Seattle is awesome. Is like where I live, there's not usually much snow. We got a little bit of snow last week,
Mhm.
but I never have to shovel my driveway, and I can just go drive an hour up the mountain and ride every weekend. So it's kind of a cool experience to be able to, go play in the snow, but not have to live in the cold and the snow and all that kind of stuff too. It's kind of nice. Saves you the shoveling time. So
Yeah.
cool.
Wouldn't that be nice?
I know, right? So let's talk a little bit about the other clubs that you guys have interacted with and some of the reactions that you've gotten from other clubs, local clubs, the county association, and the state association. You've had interactions with all of those, right? So tell us a little bit about the feedback you continue to get from all these other organizations and clubs.
Well, us uncle kind of made it. He mentioned that it was a big deal, and me being 15, I didn't think anything of it. Uh, and it wasn't until our second year, the beginning of our second year, that we actually went to a little new members meeting for a local club, and I emailed the the trail coordinator because that's the only person I could get a hold of. They sent it to the right people. I phone call and they're like, "Yeah, come. We'll give you free breakfast.
Nice.
We'll give you t-shirts and we'll give you 10 minutes to talk." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I didn't understand why we were getting such a big fuss. And it wasn't until after that first meeting when every single person in that room got up and came to me, shook my hand, shook everybody who was with me. They shook everyone's hand, and they thanked us. And a few people, it got to the point where some of the older people, they had tears in their eyes. They're like, "Thank you so much." And from there, they told us about the Crow Wing County meetings.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that there was a division. I just knew it was state and local.
Yeah,
So I got told to go to this meeting.
well, I mentioned to you too on the phone we were talking to, and I'd forgotten about it until you just said it. Is that right before I moved from Minnesota to, actually, it was actually I was still in the Brainerd Lakes area until about 2010, and so for about 2009 and 10, 2008, 9 and 10, in that range, about 2 years, I actually was the president of that county association that you're talking about. It's the Crow Wing County Snowmobile Trail Association, and there's
Mm-hmm.
about a dozen clubs in that area that are all part
It
of
does.
a little network that grooms trails, and they all work together and they have meetings to be able to make sure that they're doing shared maps and all that kind of stuff. So it's everything you're talking about is very familiar to me, and it's pretty cool to be able to kind of now see someone like yourself getting involved, and it's almost like a mini me version of me back in the day, like looking on the other side of the screen. We'll get you a fly hat, you'll be like the old version of me now. So
Fly hat, I don't know. I think I'll stick to my. No, I'm just kidding.
sled next or something, or what do you got?
No, it was HMK.
Oh, that's
I
HMK is
that's
awesome too,
box.
buddy. Yeah, HMK is awesome. The owner Kirk, I actually know personally. He's a great guy. So,
Same here.
uh, so yeah,
But
go ahead.
yeah, we went to that first county meeting,
Yep.
and we got the same reaction, and it actually got to the point where I personally tell the clubs that I can't be on the phone 24/7 because I was getting calls off the hook. When can you come talk to my entire club? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And we were like rushed. In a week's time, we went from 3, 4 people meeting at a local Mexican restaurant, talking sleds, going on weekend rides together, to, hey, we love what you're doing. My phone, I started to learn to actually answer phone numbers that I didn't know because of this. If that shows just how many calls I was getting.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
it
mean,
wasn't until
go ahead.
last season, at the very end, that we actually got invited to Winter Rendezvous, and I also got to speak in front of the entire Min USA as well.
Yeah, and so for everybody who knows, is the Winter Rendezvous is the annual state winter meeting where it's a ride-in type meeting. You can come in from all over the state and ride in, and then it's the entire state association. So Min USA stands for Minnesota United Snowmobilers Association, and so MNUSA is the state association, and so you guys have been able to have engagement and impact all the way up to the state level with what you're doing. And I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox here for a minute. I did this with you on the phone. I talked to you and tried to help you understand what the reactions you're getting from these other people and what it's about. And here's my assessment of it, right? And so what it comes down to is you have this older generation of club members that are out there that a lot of them are between 60 and 80 years old. And if you rewind back in time, it was back in the 60s and 70s is when snowmobiling, organized snowmobiling, and snowmobile clubs and all that stuff began. And those literally are the people who have put blood, sweat, and tears into everything that we all utilize today as the trail systems and the networks and the funding models. Like all of these people have gone and worked with state legislators, looked with local landowners and stuff like that to be able to get access to all of we have the resources that we have access to today. And the problem that I've seen, I've been involved in this too. I'm 45 now at this point, so I'm kind of right in that middle stage where I came up through it, didn't really have an appreciation for what the older generation had done, and for the most part, I've been one of the younger guys in any of the clubs that have been involved. And you're right, there's almost nobody behind me. You get into people in their 30s, but there's almost zero people in their 20s getting involved in clubs across the country. And a big part of it is that it's human nature, and I don't think I would fault anybody for it, but it's something that part of the reason we do this show is to educate people, right? And what I want to do is make sure people understand of, what, if people don't start to step in and get involved in these clubs, it does put all of the resources at risk, especially in a state like Minnesota where the clubs are the ones who do the grooming, right? They actually own the grooming equipment, have the contracts with the state to be able to fund the trails. They're the ones that do the maintenance of the trails, and they're the ones passionate about riding also. And so if we have a bunch of quote unquote users coming in, the snowmobilers coming in, but we don't have anybody stepping in and helping with the volunteer aspect of it and keep it going, it will go away. There's no way it can sustain itself without those volunteers. And so that's why you're getting this emotional, people literally getting teary eyed over all this, and having someone who's even remotely interested slash as passionate as you are about what you're trying to accomplish here. It's super meaningful for folks like myself and these other club members that you're interacting with, and hence the reason for all the emotion behind it and the reactions you've gotten. So I love it, man. It's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks again.
Cool.
Yeah, I understand that 100%. It just took me a while to comprehend, because I knew it was, getting to be a problem, but I didn't know the severity of it until I saw their reactions. And my uncle actually sat me down and kind of explained to me, like you just did,
Yep.
why it actually means so much to them.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And so, what what goals do you have for your club and for your impact across the nation at this point? Again, we chatted a little bit about this on the phone, and you had some goals that you had expressed about why you want to do this interview and why we want to get the word out there, and also then some goals personally for your club and long term what you'd like to see happen. So back to you.
Well, I mean, the goals are always changing, but as of right now, I think the main goal is kind of to get not necessarily a cry out for help, but just really express the severity of the situation to other kids, because I know there's probably a million across this country right now who either like watching 509, have a snowmobile, like doing anything even related to snowmobiling in and of itself across this country. And they're all like me. They didn't know about the trail systems. They know that if you cut onto that just off the trail a bit in that person's yard, that grenade makes that trail go away. We need to really educate the kids more about, you know, what all goes into the snowmobile, and really stress the importance of, even if it's just one day a year, you go out and you help clean up. There is a million doors that will open up to you, and it's not just about doing this and getting more people across the country involved. I i just want kids to understand that if you get involved and build the passion like our club did, you get more out of it than just riding on the weekends. You get lifelong memories.
Yep.
You get a lot of connections that you don't think really important until you're stranded on the side of the road and you see Jeff from so and so club riding down. He sees that you blew his motor. He's going to go back to the club after towing you home because you've earned respect with him, and he will most likely find a way to get you a new motor or a new sled.
It's true.
They will do anything nonstop. If you help them, they will help you.
That's
It really builds the community,
yeah.
if that makes sense.
It does, and I would tell you, Isaac, is what you've just described is what when I was your age, I had no idea what it meant, but it's called the network and your network, right? And so when people tell you that networking is very important and that it makes a big difference in your life and your career and what's going on, you at a very young age have already figured that out and you have a huge advantage over most people your age. And so you're right. It's about everything that you give. If you give, you're going to get 10 times back, right? And it's something I've experienced in my life. And, simple things when you give, and you're out there giving of yourself in a community like this, all it takes is for you sincerely to have something you need help with. And you just raise your hand and say, hey, guys, is anybody able to help me with this? And before you know it, you've got more offers coming back at you than you could ever have. And it'll go way better than you ever think it could go. And so, it's just awesome to hear that and to hear what's going on. So
Yeah, and for if there are any kids who listen to this, what we just said could sound like nah, 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 even though it's coming from me, right? But just an example in our own club, we have this really sweet kid named Derek. He works his butt off. He has, not gonna lie, a really crappy 2001 ZR 500.
Yep.
That thing broke down on him last year. His chain broke and his drive axle broke.
Yep.
He went to a local parts store who knew about our club, who knew, all the stuff we do in the community, as well as our connections, thanks to my uncle again. But, just being in the community, he got $400 worth of parts for his sled for free.
Awesome, right?
And then we spent $8 on chain case oil because they didn't have it there. We had to go to Fleet Farm and buy it. So we spent $8 to rebuild his sled because he was a part of something bigger than himself
Amen.
for the community.
Dude, like I love it. This is awesome. So that's amazing. And so, is there anything else about the club, the organization, your goals? One thing I'll just mention is that you've got a pretty big personal goal that you have planned for your life coming up very soon, right? Why don't you kind of let everybody in on your little secret of what you got coming for yourself personally, and then how that may or may not impact the club going forward, short term and then long term. So,
Well, I enlisted in the United States Navy shortly after my 17th birthday. Um, that was more of just to build a future for myself.
awesome.
But I am going to be leaving this summer for basics. I know my friends are going to try and push to their hardest to keep this club alive. And if for some reason this club were to die, it will still be an amber. I don't care if I get out when I'm 20. I don't care if I get out when I'm 30 or 40.
Yep.
I am going to push this club till the end of the earth. I will read network my entire life just so that I can see one more kid on a sled and one more mile of trail being preserved. I don't care if I have to be in there for 24 hours and never ride again.
Yep.
I don't care if I have to always go to meetings. I will do what it takes. And I hope other people will step up so I don't have to do everything. But there will be, this won't die. I'm this is this is the next generation of snowmobilers, and there is to be a generation to follow it.
Yeah, that's Isaac. That's awesome. And I would tell you that as big as you think your network already is, it's about to get a lot bigger. This show and the folks who watch it, they share it out literally across the entire country and into Canada and everywhere else. And I can guarantee you that after this show, you're going to have folks reaching out to you. And so, if people want to support you, help you, or get ideas from you to try and do something similar in their areas, what's the best ways for them to get a hold of you through social media? Like, you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram mostly. It seems like, right?
Instagram mostly. My Facebook page, I'm not really too good at working the Facebooks. So my page is kind of deactivated. It's there,
Yeah.
but I don't really use it. But my Instagram is 10,000, just 10,000
Yep.
underscore. Let me just read it off so I don't say it wrong.
Sure.
Lakes underscore snowmobile underscore club. And if you go onto my Instagram and you give me a message, I will help you. I will kind of tell you the things that you're going to expect to go wrong, and also the key things that you need to be doing to put yourself in the right direction, because I didn't know those things, and I personally fought through it, but I know a lot of clubs have died due to
Yep.
them not understanding that your snowmobile club structure cannot be, all right, let's talk about meetings last month. Let's talk about finances. It has to be, hey, how do you guys like in the snow? Have you got out on the 16 trail? Did you hear about the new, extension over there? Did you hear about the sad thing that happened where somebody fell through the ice? And then we bring up, ice safety. We teach them anything and everything that they want to know, because we want them to know that the snowmobile club isn't just a bunch of, no offense, but old men sitting in a room once a month, drinking coffee and saying, we have this many dollars, we need to groom Sunday because there's 6 inches of snow coming. Because that's what they think it is.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's really not.
Yep. That's awesome. And so you're getting lots of positive vibes from the folks in the chat box. I'm going to read some of them off to you. We kind of gather your thoughts, anything else you want to cover. But we have William Singer, who's out in Colorado, who says, keep riding alive. It's pretty cool to see the next generation doing such a positive thing for the sport. Um, and then we have Deb Clifford Johnson saying, "You're an amazing young man, Isaac." I have somebody with an American flag that says USA, right? So they're proud of you and your military service that you're going into and what you're doing, frankly, for the USA, for the clubs, right? Um, Joe Labernick out of Washington here says, "Right on. My hat's off to you, Isaac, for enlisting." So nice job there. And then there's a couple of questions from earlier that were a little bit random. I was going to try to work them in at the end here. And describe kind of the average winter temperatures where you're at there. Like nowadays, this last few weeks, a lot of us, when we ride across the country, like Washington, especially anybody in Washington, most time when we're riding, even British Columbia today, it was maybe 9 degrees to 25 degrees, gets up close to 32 degrees pretty regularly. But in Minnesota, midwinter, what's it like there?
Well, let me just tell you, last winter was really rough because we had Midwest was hit with that polar vortex, and although it was negative 40 degrees plus wind chill, I was still riding. My
Yeah.
sled started, so I still rode.
Yep.
But on average, it ranges from negative 20 degrees to about 10 above. And if you're really lucky and you got the nice bluebird skies, we have seen up of 26 degrees this season.
Boom.
Warmest day of the entire season. So we definitely have to bundle up.
That's awesome.
But that doesn't stop us from riding any. Oh crap! I just deleted my live. Oh well.
All right. So the 1996. What year were you born?
I was born in 2002.
So before you were born, I was still living there in Minnesota, and it was the year I started dating my wife. So it was like 24 years ago, roughly. 1996, the coldest recorded actual temperature in Brainerd, Minnesota. Do you know it?
And you're saying in Brainerd. I thought you meant in the entire.
No,
I
no.
thought you meant up in
Just
Ely.
in Brainerd, it was negative 56 degrees below zero, not counting wind chill, right? Just straight up
Yep.
air temperature, right? And the tires on my car completely froze flat spots on the bottom because the rubber was so hard from being so cold that as I drove my car away, it was going thump, 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 thump. There was flat spots in the tires in the car. It was so cold out. And just getting the car started was almost impossible in the first place. And then you let it sit there, and then you shift the transmission into gear, and the transmission fluid is so cold that it doesn't even want to move. You put it in gear, and it takes like 30 seconds for it to engage into gear. So that's cold temperatures.
Yes. I know in Ely, Minnesota, I want to say the coldest recorded temperature was. My uncle was actually snowmobiling that day. I can't remember what the date was, but I think it was negative 76 degrees.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Or something crazy like that.
Yeah, you have to dress totally different because when you're in Minnesota, you're trail riding and you're hitting across the lakes, and so you're traveling pretty good rate of speed, and so you add wind chill to that too, and so you have to be completely covered up and wearing like full face helmets instead of the motocross style helmets that we wear out west, that kind of thing, and so there's a big difference in how the riding happens there. So
I made the mistake of wearing a motocross helmet last year. Let's say my face had a lot of frostbite numerous times.
yeah, that's no good. That's no good. And then let's just wrap this up a little bit with folks you want to thank, right? So think about folks like who've helped you, the dealerships, your uncle, like whoever you want to kind of just say a little thank you to and recognize. I'd love to have you take a minute to do that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the number one person, because none of this would have happened because I wouldn't have started on my own. My uncle Brian Bleakey, we butt heads, but he is the reason I snowmobile. He's the reason I will always snowmobile, and he's the reason this club exists. So, he is the person who, all this should be going to. I'm just the person who does the youth aspect of it.
Your uncle Brian actually was a guest of mine. I want to go back. It was like early, and so everybody, if you don't know this already, you can go to Jon Ferrian Live. There's a separate Facebook page, and you can actually scroll back to all of the previous videos. And I want to say Brian's video was somewhere in the neighborhood of in the teens. I think it was like episode 13 or 16 or somewhere in that range.
I think it was 16.
Yeah. Okay. And so he actually, it was probably close to 2 years ago, for sure a year and a half ago.
It was last winter.
Yeah. And so, he talked a little bit about when you guys first kicked this off and from his perspective. So if you want to get to see who Brian is and his episode, you can go back into Jon Ferrian Live and scroll back to the old video, number 16. And so awesome. So keep going. Who else you want to say thanks to?
I want to thank every single club, but I really want to give a big shout out if anyone's watching from Brainerd Lakes area to Rob Orich, because he gave us the most motivation. And every time we saw him, heck, I saw him at the gas station last week. He always smiled, and he always just thanked us, even though he thanked 100 times because we helped him 100 times. He always thanked us, and just every club who was generous enough to lend an ear, because I know although we are the people who are, saving the sport and all, it really means a lot to us to actually be heard as well, because it's just as hard for us to go about it as you guys to, be without us, if that makes sense. And
Yep.
of course, my aunt, because if she wouldn't have adopted me, I never would have been able to uh, get this far into this adventure. And of course, if we're getting into actual sponsors and not just, friends and family, I have to thank Brothers Motorsports out of Baxter, Minnesota, for all their support and discounted prices for us, and HMK Gear for giving us another nice discount and helping us stay warm and supporting us while we ride.
That's awesome. Nice job. So, any other final thoughts or words you want to share before we wrap this up?
Um, I mainly just want to remind all of you guys that although I'm a teenager and I'm not going to be around for a long time, my Instagram DMs are always open, and I'm going to set a goal. All
Yep.
right. I want to get 10 more chapters. You don't have to call it the same thing, but I want 10 more groups doing this across the country. I want you guys to help me out, and I will help you out. I want to get 10 more groups by the time I go to basic training at least started.
That's
Let's
awesome.
see if we can get that.
Yep. And so just some ideas on that, guys, too, is I know a lot of local clubs um, would be more than willing to kind of sponsor a youth club, right? Like the youth club, don't be afraid of starting one for fear of being isolated and alone, right? Like in most cases, you could have, the 10,000 Lakes Club, for example, could be sponsored by another local club that's right there at your right hand supporting you and doing it too, but just encouraging the youth aspect of it. I think, the youth aspect of it is important, that the youth go and have fun, right? It should be about fun. It should be about riding. It should be a little bit about community service just to kind of show the value
Yeah.
and understand the value of what's going on. But I think you mentioned to me earlier, and I don't think we covered it in the show here live, but there's not a lot of quote unquote boring business stuff that happens at your meetings because you guys aren't set up that way, right? So
We talk about history. It's important to talk about history, current events, safety skills, and just get them out riding and get them fully experiencing the last mile of trail and every last in and out of the club. And I think it's important for every kid to sit through at least one meeting so they see just how much fun we're having, in case they ever question why we sit down and eat pizza and talk about the trails.
that's a great
Because
strategy.
that way we don't have to sit down and hot dogs with the old guys and talk about money.
That's awesome. All right, Isaac. Well, I think we're ready to wrap this up. And I just want to give you a big personal thank you from me for what you're doing. And know that I am now part of your network as well. And if there's anything you ever need, you feel free to reach out, shoot me a message through Instagram or Facebook. And I know you've got my personal cell phone number too. Don't be afraid to use it. And if you and your family want to come out for a mountain ride sometime in Washington State, since I know you guys and your family, so come on out, make it happen. Start bugging Brian and say, hey, Brian, when are we
I
going to
already
go out
took
riding?
spring break off.
What's that?
I took spring break off.
Well, I'm going to be in Tahoe. You guys would have to meet us down in Tahoe. So,
Ooh.
well, it depends on when your spring break is. We'll talk. Send me some text messages afterwards. Maybe our spring breaks are different weeks. We could maybe still make it work. So,
All right. Thanks
cool.
again for having me on, and I just really want to thank everybody for watching and listening.
Absolutely. And so, guys, don't forget, if you haven't already, share the show out. We're giving away that pair of 5 pivot knee guards, a $90 value. And these are knee guards that I started using this season, Isaac, and they're incredible. Actually, even for Minnesota trail riding, you guys should look at these, because all it takes is for you to hit a tree or hit a bump in the ditch or something, and you put your knees through the panels of your sled or the dash of your sled, and it's incredible. These knee pads, they're just comfortable. They, you can wear them all day. You don't even know they're there until you need them, and then you know they're there, and it's like, oh man, I'm glad I had those on. So mountain riding is a big deal because of the running boards on our mountain sleds. They've got a lot of real sharp serrated edges on them and stuff too, and people will slip off and hit their shins on them. And I've seen multiple times where people have gotten stitches, that kind of stuff. So again, share this out. Have an awesome time with those knee guards for the winter. And last week's winner with Woody's Racing, there was some nitro lubricants that we're going to be giving away. I'll be giving those back probably Tuesday night. I'm going to try to do that short little live show and give those away as well. So God bless everybody. Live large and have a great night.